Everyone got something. One by one, the kids tore through gift wrap like it was a race. Colorful boxes, cheerful squeals. My nephew Asa shouted when he got the remote control car he'd been begging for. My niece Kira hugged her brand new doll like it was gold. Even the dog got something, a chewy bone tied with a red ribbon. I watched, smiling. Then Evelyn turned to my daughter, Nyla, the last one left. She handed her a small, flat package. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said. Nyla smiled up at her and gently peeled back the wrapping. The room was quiet now, watching. What she revealed wasn't a toy or a book. It was a bar of soap. I felt the air change. My husband Dorian stiffened beside me. Evelyn smiled like she'd done nothing wrong and said, "Everyone plays their part. Yours is cleaning." Nyla didn't say a word. She just looked down at the soap resting in her lap. I was about to speak, my jaw tight, heart pounding, but then Nyla reached into her backpack. I froze. She pulled out an envelope. Quietly, calmly, she stood, walked over to Evelyn, and said, "Dad told me to give you this if you ever treated me like a maid." My heart stopped. Inside that envelope was something Evelyn never saw coming. And what happened next changed everything. The night before Evelyn arrived, I stood in the kitchen folding cloth napkins I didn't even like. I had scrubbed every surface, fluffed every pillow, and baked a second batch of ginger cookies, just in case the first one wasn't soft enough for her taste. I told myself it was for the holiday spirit, but deep down, I knew it was about her. Making things look perfect was my way of buying peace. My daughter Nyla sat at the dining table drawing a picture of a snowman family. She gave the smallest one pigtails and said, "That's me." I smiled, then gently asked her to clear the crayons so we could start setting the table. She didn't complain. Neela's always been the kind of child who tries to make things easier for everyone. That's one of the many reasons I knew I needed to protect her. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, has always had a complicated relationship with me. We're polite in public and cold in private. She was never outright cruel, but every visit came with sharp edges. Comments about my cooking, reminders that I didn't grow up in a house like hers, and questions that weren't really questions like, "Do you always wear your hair that way?" She treated Dorian like a king, and she adored Asa and Kira, our niece and nephew. But when it came to Nyla, her warmth cooled into something I could never quite name. That year, I hoped it would be different. We had invited the whole family for Christmas. Dorian had been working long hours and needed the break. Neela had just turned 8 and was starting to ask harder questions about people's behavior. She was noticing things I had tried to shield her from. A few months earlier, she had asked me, "Why does Grandma always smile like she doesn't mean it?" I told her some people confuse kindness with manners. She nodded but didn't look convinced. Dorian, to his credit, had grown increasingly uncomfortable with his mother's behavior, too. He wasn't confrontational, but he had started pulling back, limiting calls, skipping her opinion on family decisions. He told me, "I know how she treats you, and now I see it with Nyla, too. We're not going to keep pretending it's okay." So when we decided to host Christmas that year, he sat Nyla down privately and handed her a small envelope. I didn't know about it until later. He said, "If Grandma ever says something that makes you feel like you don't belong or like you're less than the others, just give her this. You don't have to argue or explain anything. Just give it to her." Nyla asked what was inside. He told her, "Only something she'll understand." That was Dorian. Quiet, calm. But when it came to our daughter, he didn't hesitate to take a stand. I fell in love with that part of him, and I think it's why Neela trusted him so deeply. She carried that envelope in her backpack for 3 weeks before Christmas, never asking about it again, never opening it, just waiting. The morning Evelyn was due to arrive, I found Nyla sitting by the front window with her backpack zipped shut beside her. She was watching the snow fall, humming quietly, her fingers wrapped around the strap like it was something precious. I asked her if she was excited. She nodded, then said, "I'm ready." I remember thinking that was a strange way for an 8-year-old to respond. Not "I can't wait" or "I hope she brought me something." Just "I'm ready," as if she knew something was coming. By the time the doorbell rang, our home looked perfect. The tree was lit, the music soft, the cocoa warm. Family poured in with laughter and scarves and snowy boots. Evelyn swept in like a queen entering a ballroom, kisses on cheeks, Praise for Asa's new haircut, compliments for the cookies she didn't know I'd made twice. When she hugged Nayla, it was brief and distracted. Then she handed her coat to me without asking and walked into the living room. I wanted that day to go well. For Dorian. For Nyla. For the family we were trying to hold together. But as I watched Evelyn hand out gifts, one by one, skipping over Nyla until the end, something in me already knew. She hadn't changed. And this time, neither had we. The living room was full. Wrapping paper crumpled in corners, mugs of cocoa half full, and the scent of cinnamon and pine in the air. Everyone had found a spot near the tree. Dorian sat beside me, one arm stretched behind my back. Nayla was cross-legged on the floor, smiling up at her cousins, who were still chattering about their gifts. Evelyn stood near the fireplace like she was about to make an announcement. She clapped her hands and smiled wide. "Okay, everyone, I've got something special for each of you." The kids leaned forward. Asa got a drone, exactly the one he'd been saving for in his allowance jar. Kira opened a glittery craft kit that made her squeal. Even Evie, their golden retriever, got a chew toy wrapped in bone-patterned paper. Evelyn made a show of remembering everyone's favorites. Each child lit up when she handed them their gift. I watched Nayla's face carefully. She was smiling, but I saw her hands clench slightly on her lap. She didn't ask when her turn was coming. She just waited. Then finally, Evelyn reached behind her and pulled out a small, flat box. No ribbon. She handed it to Neela. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said. Neela's smile twitched, and she started unwrapping it slowly. The room quieted again. I could hear the fire crackling. I leaned forward without meaning to. When the paper fell away, I saw it. A white bar of soap in a plain cardboard box. I thought I had misunderstood at first. Surely this was part of something. A joke? A handmade project? Then Evelyn spoke. Everyone plays their part. Asa helps shovel snow. Kira helps in the kitchen. Nyla's always been good at tidying up. I thought this was appropriate. Nyla looked down at the soap in her hands. Silent. Still. I stared at Evelyn. Dorian's body tensed beside me, but he didn't move. Not yet. He was watching Nyla. The cousins went silent. Kira's mouth fell open. Asa looked confused. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. I felt heat rush to my face, the kind of heat that doesn't just come from anger, but from the kind of shame that lands on your child and has nowhere else to go. I said, "Evelyn, is that really what you're giving her?" She turned to me with a casual shrug. "It's practical and meaningful. Kids today need to learn responsibility, and she's good at helping, isn't she? That's a compliment." She smiled like she had given Nyla a crown. I wanted to scream. Before I could say anything else, Nyla moved. She reached to the side and unzipped her backpack. I thought she might be pulling out a book or a toy to distract herself, maybe even a drawing to show she didn't care. Instead, she took out a plain white envelope. She stood and walked up to Evelyn, who was still beaming as if the moment had gone perfectly. Nyla held it out and said, "Dad told me to give you this if you ever treated me like a maid." Her voice was clear. Not loud, not angry, just steady. My heart stopped. I looked at Dorian, who met my eyes. His jaw was tight, but he nodded once, slowly. Evelyn took the envelope like someone had just handed her a parking ticket. "What is this?" "Something you'll understand," Nyla said. Then she walked back and sat down next to me. I wrapped my arm around her, pulled her close. She rested her head on my shoulder without saying a word. Evelyn opened the envelope. She held it with both hands, like it was heavier than it looked. There was a folded piece of paper and a check inside. I watched her face shift as she read. Her eyes moved back and forth across the page. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. Her eyes flicked up to Dorian, who was now standing. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You crossed the line." The room stayed silent. No one moved. The gifts forgotten. The fire crackled, and the air held something sharper than before. Evelyn folded the letter back up without a word. She looked smaller somehow, as if the air had gone out of her. She tucked the envelope into her purse and turned to sit down without meeting anyone's eyes. Neela didn't speak for the rest of the gift exchange. She didn't need to, because whatever was in that letter had done more than confront Evelyn. It had spoken for a little girl who had been expected to stay quiet, and now she didn't have to. After Nyla handed Evelyn the envelope, The room didn't go back to normal. The usual buzz of wrapping paper and laughter was gone. Everyone had fallen quiet, unsure of what had just happened. Evelyn had tucked the envelope into her purse without another word, and Nayla had curled into my side like nothing unusual had occurred, but something had shifted. Dorian stood for a moment longer, then slowly sat down beside us. His hand rested gently on Nyla's back. She didn't flinch or move away. She just kept staring at the fire. I wanted to ask about the letter, about the check I had seen peeking from the envelope, but I didn't want to break the silence Nyla had earned. There was strength in her quiet, and I wasn't going to take that away by filling the moment with questions. Later that evening, once the dishes were done and the kids were upstairs watching a movie, I finally turned to Dorian. "What was in that letter?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He stood at the kitchen sink, wiping his hands with a towel. Then he turned, leaning back against the counter. "I wrote it 3 months ago," he said. "After that dinner when Mom told Nyla she was lucky to have your cleaning skills passed down." I remembered that night well. Evelyn had said it with a laugh, like it was nothing. Nayla had smiled politely, but I'd seen how her face dropped when she turned away. We hadn't spoken of it since. "I didn't want to make a scene," Dorian continued, "but I also wasn't going to let it happen again, so I wrote her a letter, told her what I needed to say, calmly, clearly, and I added a check." I raised an eyebrow. "A check?" He nodded. "For $5,000. It was the rough value of everything she ever claimed she'd done for us. The babysitting, the gifts, the help when Nyla was a baby. I figured if she ever tried to use her generosity to excuse cruelty, I'd pay off whatever she thought we owed her. That way we could end the emotional transaction." I leaned against the table, trying to process it. "She kept a tally," he said. "Not just of favors, but of power. And I needed Nyla to see that we don't let people trade kindness for control." I thought of Nyla sitting at the window that morning, gripping her backpack like it was something more than school supplies. She had known something might happen. She had been prepared. "She didn't seem scared," I said. "She wasn't," Dorian replied, "because she knew she wasn't alone." That night, while Evelyn quietly packed up her things and made an excuse about needing to leave early the next morning, Nyla was in her room drawing again. When I went in to tuck her in, she held up her picture. It was of a girl standing on a mountain. There was a storm behind her, but the sky ahead was clear. "That's me," she said, "and that's the stuff I left behind." I sat on the edge of her bed and asked if she wanted to talk about what happened. She shook her head, then said, "I don't think I feel bad." "Is that okay?" I kissed her forehead. "That's more than okay." In that moment, I realized something that changed the way I thought about parenting. For years, I had tried to protect Nayla by buffering her from hard people. I had thought silence and peace were the same thing, but what Dorian had given her wasn't protection. It was preparation. He had shown her that boundaries don't have to be loud, that you can speak without shouting, that strength isn't always in how fast you react, but in how clearly you decide who you are and what you will allow. The next morning, Evelyn didn't say much at breakfast. She gave Nyla a side hug, not quite meeting her eyes. She didn't mention the soap or the letter, but I saw the look in her face as she pulled away. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. Nyla didn't say goodbye. She just waved once, then turned to help me clear the dishes. Her head was high, her voice light, as she asked if we could make pancakes later. In that small act of normalcy, I saw what real strength looked like. She wasn't waiting for an apology. She wasn't looking for approval. She had done something hard, something brave, and now she was ready to move on. And so were we. Evelyn didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the evening. She helped herself to a second glass of wine, sat near the fireplace, and scrolled through her phone like she wasn't surrounded by family. No one said a word about the envelope, but everyone had felt the weight of it. The kids stayed close to the adults, unusually quiet. Kira asked me later if Nyla was in trouble. I told her no, not even close. The next morning, Evelyn came downstairs before anyone else. I had already been in the kitchen, frying eggs and flipping pancakes like nothing had happened. She sat at the island and folded her hands neatly, like she was waiting for a meeting to begin. "I'll be leaving early," she said. I didn't look up from the pan. "All right." She was quiet for a moment. Then, with a forced calmness, she added, "I didn't mean anything by the gift. It was symbolic, thoughtful. I placed a plate on the counter. You humiliated an 8-year-old in front of her entire family and gave her something you wouldn't even hand to the dog. That's not thoughtful. That's intentional. Evelyn blinked hard as if she had been slapped. You're reading too much into it. No, I said. I'm finally reading it for what it is. Dorian entered just as I finished speaking. He kissed my cheek, said good morning to Nyla, and sat across from his mother. He didn't ask if she was staying. He didn't offer coffee. He just looked her in the eye. You read the letter? He asked. Evelyn nodded stiffly. Yes. He waited, but she said nothing more. Then I don't need to say anything else, he said. That was the final line. The conversation ended there. She picked up her purse, took one last look around the kitchen, and left. No goodbye, no apology. When the door closed behind her, Nyla peeked around the corner from the living room. Is she gone? She asked. She's gone, I said. She climbed up on the stool beside Dorian, rested her head on his arm, and said, I don't think she liked the letter. He smiled. It wasn't meant for her to like. It was meant for her to understand. Later that afternoon, Nyla and I sat on the floor, surrounded by board games and holiday music. She was laughing again, relaxed in a way she hadn't been the night before. I watched her carefully, checking for signs of hurt, signs of confusion, but they weren't there. I asked, Did it feel scary? A little, she said, but I felt like I had armor. I asked her what she meant. She pointed to the backpack. That letter was like armor. It made me feel safe, even before I gave it to her, because I knew I didn't have to argue or be loud. I just had to be ready. That line stayed with me. Be ready. I had spent so long trying to avoid conflict, trying to smooth things over, that I had never thought to prepare Nyla for. The moment she would have to defend herself. I used to believe that kids should be shielded from that kind of ugliness, but what Dorian had done was something better. He had empowered her. That night, after Nyla went to bed, I asked to read the letter. Dorian took it from the drawer where he had kept a copy and handed it to me. It said, Mom, if you're reading this, then you've done something to Nyla that crossed a line. This check covers the value of everything you think you've done for us. Childcare, gifts, support. You have mentioned them often enough. We are grateful for what was given with love. But anything given with strings attached is not a gift. It's a transaction. Nyla is not a servant. She is not less than her cousins. She is not your emotional outlet. She is our daughter, and we will never again allow her to be used as a place to direct your control or cruelty. If you want to be part of her life and ours, it must come with respect. Without that, you are not welcome. Dorian. I sat in silence for a while after reading it, not because I was shocked, but because it was everything I had wanted to say for years and never found the words for. The beauty of that moment was not just the justice of it, but the clarity. There was no screaming, no revenge, just a line drawn, and a child protected with quiet strength. What Evelyn saw as defiance, we saw as dignity. Nyla had stood up for herself without shouting. She had shown her worth without begging to be seen, and in doing so, she reminded us that being small doesn't mean being powerless. In the days after Evelyn left, the house felt different. It was quieter, but not in a heavy or awkward way. The air felt clearer, like we had opened all the windows and let something stale finally drift out. There were no more strained smiles, no tiptoeing around tension. The decorations still hung on the mantel, and the scent of cinnamon lingered in the kitchen, but the atmosphere had changed. We were lighter. Nyla bounced back faster than I expected. She didn't bring up the soap or the letter again. She didn't ask questions or second-guess herself. She played board games with her cousins, helped me clean up the wrapping paper, and asked if we could go sledding before school started again. Her confidence wasn't louder. It was stronger, steadier. I had expected the moment with Evelyn to leave a bruise. I had worried Nyla would feel ashamed or uncertain, but instead it gave her clarity. She knew, without question, that she had been treated unfairly and that she had done something about it. She didn't need to relive it or analyze it. She had taken action. That was enough. I spent more time observing her that week, not hovering, but noticing. I saw the way she stood taller when she spoke, how she looked adults in the eye a little longer. She wasn't trying to win approval anymore. She was secure in her own value. That is a rare thing to see in an 8-year-old. Dorian and I had a long talk the night after Christmas. We sat on the couch once Nyla was asleep, the lights from the tree still glowing softly. He admitted that he had debated for weeks whether to give Nyla the envelope. He had been afraid it was too much responsibility for her. But I realized something, he said. She's already smart enough to know when she's being mistreated. What we owe her isn't to protect her from knowing it. We owe her the tools to face it. That stayed with me. For years, I thought parenting meant shielding. I thought I had to create a world where Neela never saw the sharp edges. But sharp edges exist in people, in families, in conversations that are dressed up as tradition but carry the weight of control. What Nyla needed was not a bubble. She needed armor. Not armor to harden her, but to strengthen her, to give her choices, to let her know she wasn't alone when the moment came. A week after Evelyn left, a letter arrived in our mailbox. It was from her. The handwriting was firm and clean. There was no check enclosed, no gifts, just a letter. She wrote that she had read Dorian's words more than once, that she had never thought of herself as cruel, but that maybe she had been. She didn't apologize directly to Nyla, but she said she was sorry for any moment that made her feel small. She ended the letter by saying she needed time to think and that she understood if we needed time too. I read it once, then handed it to Dorian without comment. We both agreed it was a start, not a solution, and we were fine with that. That weekend, I sat down with Neela while she worked on a puzzle. I asked her if she felt proud of what she did. She nodded. "Are you glad you gave her the letter?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Would you do it again?" She looked up at me and answered without hesitation. "Yes, because I'm not her maid." That was it. No need for big speeches or emotional breakdowns, just truth, plain and sure. She had found her voice and she wasn't afraid to use it. I don't think Evelyn meant to be cruel. I think she came from a place where roles and respect were confused, but intention doesn't erase impact. And in that moment, Nyla taught all of us something powerful. She showed us what it looks like to take a stand without raising your voice, to set a boundary without a breakdown, to demand respect, not with anger, but with certainty. Sometimes strength comes quietly. Sometimes courage fits inside a child's backpack, sealed in an envelope, waiting for the right moment. And when that moment comes, it can change everything. Thank you for listening to our story. If it reminded you of someone in your life, or made you think about the quiet ways we stand up for ourselves and the people we love, I hope you'll share it. These moments may seem small, but they shape who we become. And sometimes they even change families. If you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to make you feel small, or if you've seen a child show quiet courage like Nyla did, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their strength. If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you enjoy real stories with real heart, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. We've got more coming, more stories, more moments that stay with you long after the video ends. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.